guys, welcome back to Room 237 as I continue my marathon of Italian horror and Giallo films. And I've got yet another Giallo film, but for this I'm going back to the Pre-Argento 60s for one by well-known Giallo director Massimo Dallamano before his Schoolgirls in Peril trilogy for 1968's A Black Veil for Lisa, which I will say the title, this cover, and even the tagline, White Veils for Angels, Black Veils for Lisa, does give it a very strong 40s noir type feeling. And even the back, which is, all black and white, really gives it a noir vibe. Actually, I wouldn't have minded this movie in black and white, which you wouldn't normally say with Giallo or Italian films in general, because their colors usually pop, a lot, and it's a lot of the appeal. Sorry about that. Appeal of the film, but I don't know. Some of these stills do look pretty cool, black and white. But yeah, this one does have quite a noir feel to it. Now it stars John Mills, who had a very long career before this, has done a lot of stuff. Luciana Paluzzi plays Lisa, and she's absolutely gorgeous. Which, from what I've read, she did not do her own nude scenes. That was a body double. And Robert Hoffman, who I ranted on in Nika Girl Murdered in the Park, but he actually does a much better job in this. So those are our three main players. There are some other people. And the musical is by Gianfranco Reverberi, who, that name sounds familiar. I don't think I have. So he did the Django films back in the 60s. Jess Franco's Venus and Furs, which I do have. Nothing else. At least that's listed here. But, and this was also a co-production with West Germany. Maybe because it takes place in Hamburg, but yeah, it was shot in Hamburg, takes place in Hamburg. This one does have a very interesting story. Of course, actually it has kind of a bit of a Twilight Zone type of plot, but where this was pre-Argento, Giallo was very different. I mean, it was still a murder mystery, but it focused a lot on the misdeeds of the wealthy in high society. Now, of course, the main character here is an inspector. Not to say they're crazy rich, but there are a couple scenes where his wife does see him so she can go shopping. It takes a lot of money. And they do have a nice house. But yeah, this one isn't as much of the high society ones as other Giallo of the period. Also, this one is not really a murder mystery. There still are twists and turns throughout, but pretty much the whole film on this, the whole story is John Mills plays Franz Boulon, who he's a police inspector who's obsessed with the notion that his wife Lisa is having an affair with who or whomever. He doesn't know, and he doesn't care. He just knows it's in his head that she's having one. So he pretty much has her on lockdown. She's not allowed to leave. He's always trying to call her. He's always wondering where she went, who she was talking to on the phone. All the while, there's this subplot of these drug dealers being killed, and he finds out it's this hired hitman that's been taking them all out. He's played by Robert Hoffman. And finally, I mean, it takes a while to get into, but he hires Hoffman to kill his wife. And in doing so, she starts an affair with him. She doesn't know Boulon put him up to it, but she starts an affair with him. And it's implied that she's been faithful up to that point anyway, or maybe he just hasn't caught on, and we, the audience, don't really know. It's kind of hard to draw the line on where spoilers would begin and end with this. I'm guessing the final scene. But sorry, I keep wiping my nose. It's just my nose will not stop running. More dog hair everywhere today than usual. But, so yeah, they start having an affair, and then, of course, Boulon is really bogged down by the weight of this drug dealer case, and also he knows about the affair between Hitman and his wife, and what is he going to do about it. So a kind of a Twilight Zone-y type of plot, but it really does work well once it gets going. I mean, it takes about 50 minutes before he finally catches the hitman and says, I want you to do this. But the build-up, the first 50 minutes can be kind of boring, especially the whole subplot with this other case, with the murder cases. And taking down this drug kingpin named Shrooman. All that is not terribly interesting. All the stuff with his wife and his assumptions and how everything kind of adds up, all that's interesting and well done. Of course, D'Amato would go on to be more well known for his Giallo films, What Have You Done to Solange and What Have They Done to Your Daughters, which is vastly more sleazy than this. I mean, the only real sleaze scenes in here, of course it was still the 60s, is when he's getting flashes in his head of what she could be doing. Quick glimpses of her naked body double. That's pretty much it. There's not really a whole lot of blood either. I mean, there's a couple stabbings, but it's more stylized than anything. Than like a gunfight at the end. Max is the hitman played by Robert Hoffman. His performance is much, much better than Naked Girl Murdered in the Park. He's this very superstitious hitman who has this silver dollar with a bullet in it. Apparently it saved his life once, so now that's his lucky charm. He's always flipping it. And coincidentally, I mean, when I see anyone flipping a coin, it makes me think of Two-Face. He could have played Harvey Dent back in the 60s. I mean, he looks like a perfect pre-Two-Face Harvey Dent. And of course, Luciana Paluzzi, you do feel bad for her to a point. I mean, there are times where she does, threaten to have an affair just to piss him off. But you do feel bad for her, but she does have this sort of sinister look to her, like, and attitude. Like, there is more than she's letting on. So, she really works for the character. Well written, and the whole cast does do a good job, including Hoffman. But again, sorry I keep wiping my nose. It just won't stop. I did blow my nose before I started doing this. Of course I did. As far as how it's shot, none of the music really stuck out to me. As far as being, like, I can't really think of any pieces that really stuck out. Some of the shots, like, it opens with a funeral. It zooms in, freezes on Lisa's face, and then we get the story of whose funeral she's at. Then it ends at the funeral. We do get her POV with the veil coming down. I do like that touch. There is a shot when, because Max likes to smoke joints with hashish in it, and there is a shot where we get his POV after he exhales the smoke as he looks at Lisa. I thought that was a decent shot. There were more that I was trying to remember. It feels like a pretty straightforward film. I still do need to see Solange and Daughters. I will be ordering those very soon. They're on like one of the next 2 orders that I'll be placing. But basically, every time he starts to trust Lisa, something happens or there's a miscommunication. So he's right back to thinking she's up to no good and going back to the plan he had with Max. You know, he finds out she's been out all day, but she left a message. When he goes to the place where she said she was at, this one woman said she left in a red Porsche. He asks her who the Porsche belonged to. She said it was one of her female friends. So then at work, he looks into it. He has someone look into it for him. But this is when he catches Max, and he decides, you know, I want you to do this for me. Because that was another scene. Delamato can set up good emotional buildup and suspense. But I'll finish my first thought. But after he makes the deal with Max, that's when he gets back to the office, and the person looking into it says, oh, I looked into that Porsche. It does belong to this woman. And he realized that Lisa was telling the truth, and that he might have made a mistake. But after he arrests Max for the murders that we saw, as he's driving him to the station, he sees the Porsche, the red Porsche, driving around, and he's chasing it. All the while, in his head, he has images of her with another man, echoey voices, close-up of him with tears, and it flows very well. You can really tell how he's feeling, especially, I don't remember how the music goes, but I remember there being music, and just placed with everything that's going on in his head that we're seeing. You can really tell what he's feeling and what is going on with him at that moment. And John Mills does a good job with, you know, just acting with his face and his emotions. And of course, Max's attempt is, so then he goes straight home and says, hey, don't answer the phone or the door for anyone, but the first person to come around is Max as an insurance salesman. She lets him right in, and they begin their affair. But then just as Boulon wants to call it off, Max tells him, hey, she just let me right in the house, and, you know, she let me have her right there. That's the kind of wife you have. So then he's right back to, I hired you to do something, so just do it. It is this emotional, mental kind of roller coaster for him. And I think it's very well acted. And well paced, too. I mean, it's only 88 minutes. I will say the first 50 minutes before he initially arrests Max is kind of slow. But once he makes the deal, and once the whole I want you to kill Lisa part of the plot comes in, it does get a lot better. I'm going to say spoilers here, even though there's not many spoilers. I mean, there's really one big thing that I'm still not entirely positive as to what happened. I mean, I have what I took away from it. But I definitely can recommend this. I do think this is a good pre-Argento 60s Giallo. especially if you're into more Twilight Zone-y type stories where there's twists and turns, irony, whether it be poetic justice or uh, twisted twisted irony, um, or if you're like a noir fan, because like I said, this does have a very noir type feeling to it. Uh, then yeah, I could definitely recommend it. Also, if you liked Solange and Daughters, check this out just to see what else Dalamato was doing and what Giallo was like in the 60s. But just don't expect your typical 70s Giallo, because everything pre-Argento was still very different. Giallo was still very new. But yeah, I did dig this film. I really liked the story. I thought it played out well. I thought it was very interesting. Did have some pacing issues, but well acted, well written. The set designs and everything, like the colors really pop like they always do. Even though I can't remember any specific examples, it is still shot very well. I will say, when we first see Max kill someone, there is a lot of shadow, and he does have black all over his face to further obscure himself. I will say that was well shot too. So with that, yes, I can definitely recommend it. And starting now, spoilers. So one other sequence that I thought was well shot was the last time Max is with Lisa. And it really is towards the end of the film. Boulon knows, he tells Max, you've been on this job for 2 days and you haven't killed her yet. Um, it took Lisa 2 days to get into my heart and house, and now it's taken you 2 days. I know you're having an affair. I know you're in love. Which actually, that's during their final encounter. But before that, Boulon knows the only way to break up the affair is to turn Max in. But he knows if he does that, Max is going to take him down as well. So he writes out pretty much a confession for his boss. Max killed all of these drug dealers associated with Schumann. One of them is called Reinhardt. I meant to mention this earlier, but Reinhardt, I think, was another person that was killed by Max, whom Lisa was having an affair with. And it was some time ago, and I think that's why Franz is kind of weary about her and not very trustworthy. But, so while he's setting up this confession, he calls Max to say, hey, let's meet out in the woods by where you're staying. And he's with Lisa. That's when we get the shot of him with the hashish, the smoke, POV. And you do have this suspenseful, well-orchestrated scene where he's getting ready in the bathroom. He has a switchblade. She's talking to him. And he's like standing there, but when she turns around, he steps by the wall. Or like when they hug goodbye, he's got it strapped to his arm. He's got it like right here. He could kill her, but he chooses not to. And then they have their meeting when he says, I know you're not going to kill her. I know she's worked her way into your heart. And, this is why you're under arrest. I know I'm going to go down too, but it's worth it. I'm willing to pay it. Max gets the upper hand, stabs him, runs all the way back to the lodge where he's staying. Lisa's gone, but by then, the boss has already read his letter, and the police force has shown up to where Max is staying. You do get a nice chase scene through the woods. I love how the woods looks. You get a couple like Blair Witch shots of him looking up at the top of the trees. And it does take place in like the fall, so it looks really nice. And then finally, shootout he dies, and we see Lisa pulls up to this house, this sort of mansion, hugs and kisses this other man, and he's talking to her the way Franz did, like, don't pretend you love me. I know what you were out doing. He says, I know you were having a thing with Max, who was a hitman who worked for me. Oh, and by the way, Boulon was the one that hired him. So we get the zoom, dramatic twist music as it hits her. I took it as she was having an affair with this guy the whole time. And, you know, he knew everything that was going on. So, yeah, the Porsche did belong to someone else. Or was being used by someone else. I pretty much just took it as, okay, she has been having an affair with this guy also. Or maybe even this guy thinks they're married and Boulon was her affair. I'm not entirely sure, but the twist is she wasn't just with Boulon the way she said. So she has always had stuff going on. And then we go back to the funeral from the beginning. It zooms out from her face. We get the POV with the veil of someone saying how great her husband was, which I think implies that she never told anyone that he hired someone to kill her. His cop legacy is going to remain intact. Then as the casket lowers, we zoom back in on her face, freeze, and that is the end of the movie. So it's not one of my favorites from the Pre-Argento era, but I do think it's a very solid story. I mean, an untrusting husband hires a hitman to kill his wife that he truly believes and obsesses over not being faithful, and then she ends up having an affair with the hitman. I think that's a solid story for a Giallo, and I thought it was well acted. Even Robert Hoffman, who I ranted on in the last movie I saw him in, I thought he did a fine job here. Definitely a different way to go about the Giallo formula. I mean, it's not a murder mystery, but there's still a twist at the end. And yeah, I still think it's a pretty solid film. Not really sure what else to say. I mean, it is very different than most other Giallos I've talked about, but the formula in the genre was still being worked on, even in '68. But I'm definitely more excited to see Dallamato's other films as soon as I get them. So that is Black Veil for Lisa, and stay tuned for more Italian horror and Giallo films. Thank you for watching.